The 7/7 bombings, policymakers and security chiefs have relied on Muslim organisations to help prevent radicalisation. However, this week, a prominent Muslim think tank accused some mainstream Islamic groups of being extremist sympathisers. Well, Maajid Nawaz, the director of the Quilliam Foundation, is here, and in Exeter, Jonathan Githens-Mazer, an expert in extremism and radicalisation at Exeter University. Gents, good to see you both. Maajid, we'll start with you. First of all, I mean, many of the organisations you listed in your report have been used by the government, in some cases funded by the government as well. Is it the case, in your view, that none of these organisations can in fact be trusted?
Well, I think what we're trying to say is that these organisations, though they may speak against violence, they sympathise with the ideology that we call Islamism. And for the government to support them or fund them or empower them is akin to the government supporting the British National Party against Combat 18. And I think we wouldn't consider it when it comes to white fascists. We should definitely not consider it when it comes to brown fascists.
But there's a difference, isn't there, between people who believe in Islamism and those people who want to pursue Islamism with violent means?
Of course there's a difference, which is why I was quoted by the former Prime Minister in Parliament as opposing banning non-violent Islamists. My name was quoted, it's there on Hansard, because we've opposed banning Hizb ut-Tahrir and anyone beneath them in terms of non-violent Islamist groups. However, that does not... An
organisation of which you were a member.
I used to belong to for 13 years. What that does not mean, however, is, like again we would oppose banning the BNP, that just because we oppose banning them because they're not violent, it does not mean that taxpayers' money should be used to subsidise their existence and promote them as Muslim spokespeople. There's the difference. That the civic challenge must exist with non-violent extremist organisations.
Jonathan, what do you make of what Quilliam did?
Well, I mean, I think there's something slightly disingenuous in Quilliam. I think the real thing is that they posit a specific line because it's a business. It's how they put money on their table. So to that extent, they go which way the political wind blows. They have to justify putting down all kinds of other organizations because it's the only way that they can justify existing themselves.
Well, that's it's quite an accusation.
Indeed, that's quite an accusation. I'm surprised Johnson's saying that, especially because the centre he works at is actually funded by some of the organisations we've named who do have serious Islamism problems. However, I don't want to get into a tit for tat about funding, because I think Jonathan would be aware of the fact that since our inception 2.5 years ago, we've been arguing the very same line through the Labour government and now through the coalition government. It's got absolutely nothing to do with the political
But you do try to paint yourself
wind.
as an independent think tank when you are pursuing government funding.
Part of our funding, in fact a large part of our funding, comes from government. However, we are also funded by private foundations and individuals, and we began being 100% privately funded, and that funding that we got from a certain Kuwaiti foundation was cut when we criticised suicide bombings inside Israel. So we then began to change our funding sources due to that, and we were forced to go to public grants as well.
I mean, why would it be wrong, Jonathan, for a group which is painting itself as counter-radicalisation, counter-extremism, to get government funding and as a result of that influence government thinking on these issues?
But see, for me, it's not even about funding, and it doesn't shock me that Maajid really kind of goes down that line. One of the things that happens is that you have an organization that holds a specific ideological point of view. It's a very political point of view. They base their whole opinions not on research, but on what they feel. Now, the point is, it's not that they don't have a right to say it, it's not that it's not an important voice, but the point is, that's a very political voice. It's not evidence-based. There's no research to support it. I'll give you a great example. What you get from the Quilliam Foundation many times is this line that not all extremists are terrorists, but all terrorists are extremists, and therefore extremism causes terrorism. This is a logically false argument. It doesn't work. It doesn't work scientifically, and it doesn't work academically. It works industrially. It works as a great spin in order to try and get money and influence political agendas. But the fact is that doesn't lead to evidence-based policy. Now, this is the problem. When they produce these documents that go to government and say you should work with someone and you shouldn't work with the other, there's no evidence base for this. This is all opinion. It's not scientific.
Well, I mean, it's a fair point, Maajid, isn't it? I mean, you do need evidence-based policy, surely. I mean, some of the accusations that have been levelled at other Muslim groups in the country is that they're unrepresentative. I mean, couldn't that be pointed at the Quilliam organisation as well?
Absolutely it could, and we are not representative. We're a think tank. It's not our job to represent people. It's our job to devise policy and think out of the box. So that would be an accurate accusation to make. We don't claim to be representative.
But then how,
and I'd like to say, excuse me, I didn't interrupt you,
how,
Jonathan, let me finish, please. I'd like to say, if it's not about funding, please don't make funding as your first point that you raise live on television. Now, as for the specific allegation of not having research that's evidence-based, I would concede that there's no 100% solid evidence that links non-violent extremism extremism to terrorism. But I would then also ask others who make that point to concede that you can't apply the process in reverse. Then don't use extremists.
So how is it
to think you can take terrorists and take them away from violence?
Secret advices.
Okay, well, let Jonathan come back on this.
I don't understand then what gives Maajid, what makes Quilliam think that they have this right then to dictate to government who they should and shouldn't work with. I mean, it's absolutely outrageous.
Well, if I had the power to dictate to government, I'd be a lot more powerful than having to debate with you on Sky.
One of the organizations named in this secret document is the North London Central Mosque.
Yes.
And on the grounds that somehow it's a hotbed of radicalization. Actually, what you had in the refounding of Finsbury Park Mosque, and I was at the 5th year anniversary event, is a complete success story. Now, this success story is always ignored by Quilliam in pursuit of funding and political points. And to that extent, they constantly go where the wind blows.
Okay, so coming back to, I don't know which accusation to begin with. The North London Mosque has recently been accused in Parliament by one of its former trustees, Khalid Mahmood MP, as having hosted Abdul Muttalib, the Christmas Day bomber, and Anwar Awlaki, the Al-Qaeda theoretrician. Some of the other organizations we listed on the list that Jonathan's so crazy about, the Cordoba Foundation. They, in Kensington and Chelsea Town Hall, hosted the Al-Qaeda preacher, Anwar Awlaki. The Muslim Safety Forum, its trustee, Azad Ali, has declared on television that he does not believe in democracy. He happens to be a civil servant as well. And so I think there is a serious problem with these organizations. Now,
well, let me just put one final point on the back of that then to Jonathan. And you talk about evidence-based policy in all of this, Jonathan, but Quilliam Foundation, both directors are former Islamists. They've turned their back on that particular ideology. Doesn't that experience count for something when trying to tackle these problems?
Of course, and their voice needs to be heard. I would never argue that in a democracy that voice shouldn't be heard. But let me tell you, it's not academic and it's not scientific. If I went and said I'm going to base all my experiences of dealing with car mechanics and have only gone to one auto mechanic that was good or that was bad, and that said that applies to all auto mechanics, that can't be right. What you have are two people that have very important, interesting experiences. But it's not scientific proof. It's not causal logic. In fact, it's not logical at all, the kinds of arguments that they're putting forward in that way.
Gents, I'm afraid that we're going to have to leave you to agree to disagree on that this morning. Hopefully we'll visit that again sometime soon. Maajid Nawaz and Jonathan Githens-Mazer, thank you both. Lots online this morning. Go to skynews.com and you can keep up to date with the latest political gossip on the